computer. Okay, we are recording now. Hello everyone. Hello Namit, John on the call, and everyone else who will be joining later or watching this later. Thank you everyone for joining. We are continuing our reading and discussion on Srimad Bhagavad Gita. We are on the second chapter of it. Let me start with some prayers and then we'll start looking at what we looked last time and then how we are building towards an argument that Krishna is speaking on. So, start with prayers. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudirayet Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagvat Sevaya Bhagavate Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nashtiki Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Alright, so we are on the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. We looked at 3 verses last time from 26 to 28. We also discussed a brief summary of so far where we have come. We talked about that Arjuna is giving his arguments for not fighting in the war. He sees his friends, family members, and he gives 4 reasons why he doesn't want to fight. He tells Krishna that he is feeling compassion for his friends and relatives. That's why he doesn't want to fight. Then secondly, he thinks that there is no enjoyment in the victory. Even if he fights, he won't be able to enjoy. The third thing he says that he's afraid of the sinful reactions that may come in because of killing. And then fourth argument is of the reason for why Arjuna didn't want to fight was that it will destroy family traditions. That if he fights and if he kills or if they kill him, then men from families would die. As a result, nobody would remain to protect their women and kids. And women and children, if they're not protected, then impious men would come and take advantage and abuse them and would result into chaos. So that's why he doesn't want to fight on these grounds. And he tells Krishna at the beginning of the second chapter we looked at that I don't want to fight Krishna. How can I counterattack these people? They deserve my respect. I'll just probably beg, or I don't even know if they should kill me or I should kill them. I don't know. So I'm confused about my duty. I have lost every bit of composure I had, and I am your disciple now. I am asking you to help me. So Arjuna, not realizing what he needs to do, he takes shelter of Krishna. He says that Krishna, you help me, you support me, you guide me. What needs to be done here? Because I cannot find any means to drive away. And we saw this principle that taking shelter of a guru, getting a counselor involved, getting a higher personality, because sometimes it happens that we may be able to solve many problems in our life, but when there are such spiritual moral dilemmas, when such things happen, we have to look at a higher authority. In this case, it happened to be Krishna who was right there present with him and asking Krishna for instructions. So Krishna started smiling and Krishna started responding that Arjuna, you talk like a learned person, but actually it's foolish what you're saying because you are lamenting for the body. The wise don't lament for living nor for the dead, right? You have always existed, Arjuna. You always exist and you will continue to do so. Same for all these people. It's the soul that goes from one body to another body and it moves into another body at the time of death. So you should not be bewildered by such a change. And even if you're bewildered, if you see that you are seeing the suffering and pain and pleasure, then you should learn to tolerate. That's how it should be, because this is a world of duality. There's dual nature in this world. Happiness and distress comes, appearance and disappearance of winter and summer season. So Arjuna, don't be disturbed by them. So Krishna, what he's doing is, he's giving 2 broader themes here in this chapter. The first theme is understanding the science of the soul through analytical study. So Krishna is presenting an analysis. He's saying that the soul is actually it never changes. It always remains as it is. And the body always changes, right? So that which pervades the entire body is the soul. And nobody can destroy the soul. Arjuna, if you think that you will kill them, that's wrong. Why? Because nobody has ever been able to kill the soul, right? The body is destructible. The body will come to an end, but the soul is indestructible, immeasurable, and eternal. You cannot measure it. It is indestructible and it's eternal. So therefore, Arjuna, don't think that you will kill the soul, because the soul does not kill and the soul can never get killed. The soul never takes a birth, it doesn't die, it does not, has not come into being, does not come into being, and will not come into being. It is always unborn, eternal, ever existing. Therefore, nothing happens to the soul when the body dies. So how can you think that you will kill the soul? Right? It's like garments. The body is just like giving up older garments and picking up new garments. So soul accepts new bodies and moves on. So therefore, dear Arjuna, the soul is never cut to pieces. So he's giving an analysis of the soul. It's unbreakable, insoluble. It cannot be burned, dried, everlasting, everywhere, right? So knowing this, you should not grieve for the body. So this is what we saw the previous sessions. In the last session, then Krishna moved on to the second phase of his argument. He said that, okay, let's say Arjuna, you are worrying for the body. Arjuna could argue that, but Krishna, it's okay that nothing happens to the soul, but what about the body? I'm still killing the body, right? So then Krishna responds, is anticipating that question from Arjuna. Krishna is responding that if you think that if you think that the soul is born and die, even then you have no reason to lament. Why? Because somebody who takes his birth is sure to die, and after that one is sure to take birth again. That's the nature of this world. So in your unavoidable discharge of your duty, you should not lament. It has come to your duty, Arjuna. At this point, you have become you are a warrior, and you have to fight for righteous principles. That's your duty. A duty of a student is to study, get education. A duty of a farmer is to do farming, no matter what the circumstances. So what to speak of you? You are a warrior. Your duty is to fight, and fight on religious principles. And this is the time we have tried avoiding. It's not that you should be violent, but we have tried avoiding the war by all means possible. But when it became unavoidable, when Duryodhana, Dushasan and Dhritarashtra, when they did not listen, they did not pay any heed to any of our arguments, war was inevitable. They even tried to capture Krishna, we have seen previously. And there is an incredible poem by Indian poet Ramdhari Singh Dinkar called Rashmi Rathi, where he talks about how Duryodhana tried to capture Krishna, and then Krishna then showed his manifestation, his divine manifestation, that, oh, foolish Duryodhana, you want to capture me. So the point being, they have tried avoiding the war at all costs, but when it becomes unavoidable, at that point, Arjuna, don't run away from your duty. It's your duty to fight. So therefore, in your unavoidable discharge of duty, don't lament that, oh, now what will I do? Now I'm feeling compassion. No, they are not feeling any compassion at all. So why should you feel compassion? They are ready to pounce upon you. So you should get up, fight, and be ready. Then he finally explained that the soul, all created beings, they are unmanifest in the beginning. At one point they don't have a body. Then they become manifest in their body, and they become unmanifest again. The bodies that you see are disappeared. So what is the need for lamentation? It's just a principle of the world. Even if you don't kill them, they are going to die regardless. So don't worry, just do your duty and let time and things, circumstances take care of it all. So these were the arguments. This is called as Jnana Yoga or Sankhya Yoga. There are two more verses here, 28, 29 and 30. We'll look at those. And from 30th onwards, Krishna talks about karma. What is karma yoga? So what is karma yoga? Karma that leads to duty, and karma that is doing work without reactions. So let's look at verse number 29 and 30 and move from there. So verse number 29. Ascharyavat pashyati kaschedinam ascharyavat vadati tathaiva chanya आश्चर्यवाच्यैनम् अन्यः शृणोति श्रुत्वापि एनं vedana chaiva kaschit. Synonyms: Ashcharyavat, as amazing; Pashyati, sees; Kaschit, someone; Enam, this soul; Ascharyavat, as amazing; Vadati, speaks of; Tatha, thus; Eva, certainly; Cha, also; Anyaha, another; Ascharyavat, similarly amazing; Cha, also; Enam, this soul; Anyaha, another; Shrinoti, hears of; Shrutva, having heard; Api, even; Enam, this soul; Veda, knows; Na, never; Cha, and; Eva, certainly; Kaschit, someone. Translation: some look on the soul as amazing, some describe him as amazing, some hear of him as amazing. while others, even after hearing about him, cannot understand him at all. So he's talking about soul. What is he saying? Krishna is saying that some people look at the soul and they think that wow, it's amazing, because we talk about soul, right? Soul, this minute particle is illuminating the entire body. You cannot see it through a microscope. You can only feel its presence through consciousness, and then it just, you can't find it in the body. How is it happening? So some people, when they think of consciousness, even in modern science today, consciousness is a big mystery. It's one of the gray areas of science where there is no common understanding of what soul is and what is a soul supposed to do. They have no idea what is the soul, or what is the origin of consciousness. People have postulated various theories, such as the hard problem of consciousness, such as the soft problem of consciousness. They talk that consciousness comes from as an emergent phenomena from things happening in the brain, but again they don't have any proof. It's just a theory. Then there are theories which says that consciousness is actually not there. There is nothing called as consciousness. It's just chemical reactions that are happening. Then the counter arguments come that if it's all chemical reactions, then why cannot we produce it in a lab? Why cannot we generate consciousness? Even with artificial intelligence, it's a big question right now. What is AI and how can we make it conscious? So consciousness is amazing. It's phenomenal. It has, even ancient philosophers such as Rene Descartes, he famously gave his statement, cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I exist. So what is that I that is doing the thinking? So people have always been amazed by this idea of consciousness or soul. So even if they don't read, they may not be in touch with Vedic scriptures, but they are still affected by what is this brilliant idea of what is consciousness. So some look at it as amazing. Some describe him as amazing when some start talking about it, because the body, there's nothing in the body, everything originates from the soul. Everything starts from a living entity. Without living entities in the world, there's nothing in the world actually. Right? So some describe him as amazing, that look at this brilliant nature of this soul, that how it is illuminating the body, and how there are so many souls in the world, in plants and in animals and in bacteria and insects, and how they're interacting with each other. And some hear of him as amazing, and when somebody looks at scriptures and books, then they hear of the soul as amazing, that what a brilliant living entity this soul is. Right? While others, even after hearing about him, cannot understand him at all. And some people, after reading and understanding also, they don't understand what is this soul, what is the nature of it. Welcome, Amrita. We are on the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Thank you for joining in. We are midway on the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita. I'll give you a brief summary before we end, so that you are caught up. But we are looking at Krishna's response to Arjuna. When Arjuna says, I don't want to fight, Krishna is giving him various reasons. One of them being that, think of yourself as a soul, not as body. Don't identify with the body, and understand the spirit of the soul. So that's what we are looking at. Anyway, so I'll continue. So Krishna is saying that some people look at this soul, this conscious entity, and they think of it as what an amazing entity this is. Some describe the soul as amazing, right? Because they know, for example, these great Greek philosophers that we have seen, or great Indian philosophers, or ancient philosophers and scientists all over the world are fascinated by the idea of consciousness. There's a growing body at Harvard University, at University of Arizona, at great schools in the world, looking at the idea of consciousness. There are famous mathematicians, there are famous artificial intelligence scientists such as John Searle, who famously gave his Chinese room argument problem of trying to put a label around consciousness. How do you understand it? Then there is the famous double slit experiment in physics, where observation changes the reality, and based on which our famous scientist Heisenberg presented his Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Sorry, not his uncertainty principle. What I meant to say was his Schrodinger's cat experiment. That is the cat alive in the box? Is it dead in the box? It's totally based on observation. And where is the observation coming from? It's from a conscious observer. So a conscious observer is involved. So what is this consciousness? It has stumped and trumped scientists. It's still, even till today, nobody has a framework for how to understand consciousness. People look at it from a biological perspective. People look at it from an artificial intelligence perspective. They think that whether they develop these neural networks and this deep learning models, then would they be able to replicate consciousness? Then some people look at from the perspective of philosophy. Some people look at it from the perspective of cognitive science. Is it a function of the brain? The point being that consciousness is an exceptional phenomena that we see in the world. And that's what Krishna is hinting at, that consciousness, as we have seen in previous verse, that this consciousness is actually is a reflection of the soul. Actually, consciousness is a byproduct of the soul. So when somebody looks at it, if you truly look, you'll see that what an amazing thing this soul is. Some describe the soul as amazing or consciousness as amazing, and some hear of it as an amazing, while others, even after hearing about him, cannot understand him at all. So that's the point that Krishna is trying to make here, right? In the Kathopanishad, in the purport to this verse, it is said that this nature of this soul is given. A very similar verse appears in Bhagavad Gita, is what appears in Kathopanishad also. That if you look at a gigantic animal, right, a huge animal, but or a gigantic banyan tree, even in those, the soul is still very tiny. So this tiny soul, it doesn't mean that in a body of a big animal, the size of the soul is big, or in the body of a small animal, the size of the soul is small. It doesn't matter. The size of the soul is fixed. Actually, the scriptures say that the size of the soul is 1/10,000 the tip of the human hair. So if you take our human hair, and if you take the tip of it, and if you divide it by 10,000, that's the size of the soul. So this incredible tiny little particle, which is not even material, it is anti-material. There was also talk of antimatter back in the day. Now it has subsided, but back in the 60s and 70s, a lot of people talked about matter and antimatter, and where is antimatter? And then that kind of died down. People started looking at other ways. So this anti-material self, soul, it's such a small tiny entity, and it's producing the consciousness in the entire body. It is making sure that the body is functioning. This soul lives. So this little tiny little entity is powering the entire body and how things are working out, and giving us consciousness, the ability to understand and the ability to ask this question, that who am I, where am I? So just imagine what a brilliant idea this is of the soul actually. So this is what it is Krishna is describing, that if you truly think about the idea of being alive, that I am alive, I can see things, I have my hands, I have my arms, I am doing things in the world. Where is that all originating from? It's the ability of the soul, the ability of consciousness to understand itself, to understand the world around it. The curiosity that we exist, that we see, what does it mean? What does it mean to be? What does being alive mean? All these great questions that great philosophers have asked over the number of years, actually, they all originate from the idea of a spiritual being. Right? So that's the point. That's what Krishna is trying to say here, that Arjuna, this soul is such an incredible thing. Actually, if you truly understand the idea of a soul and consciousness, it will blow your mind away, actually, just thinking about it, and we take it for granted. So that's the point that Krishna is saying. And here in the purport, it is written that the best way to understand subject matter is to accept the statements of Bhagavad Gita. As we go from one chapter to other chapter to all the 18 chapters, it's a conclusive science on self-realization, actually. That's the end goal of Bhagavad Gita, is to bring us to the point of self-realization. Okay, let's move on. Verse number 30. Dehi nityam avadhyoyam dehe sarvasya bharata tasmat sarvani bhutani natvam shochitum arhasi. Synonyms. Dehi, the owner of the material body. Nityam, eternally. Avadhya, cannot be killed. Ayam, this soul. Dehe, in the body. Sarvasya, of everyone. Bharata, O descendant of Bharata. Tasmat, therefore. Sarvani, all. Bhutani, living entities that are born. Na, never. Tvam, you. Shochitam, to lament. Arhasi. So what is Krishna saying? He's saying that, O descendant of Bharat, he who dwells in the body can never be slain. Therefore, you did not grieve for any living being. So concluding all of the verses, so till verse number 30th, this is finally the conclusion of Krishna's first argument. Arjuna said, Krishna, I don't want to fight. Right? In the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna gives 4 reasons of why he does not want to fight in the battle. And the first chapter goes on to describe the lay of the land, right? Who is fighting, who is on which side. And it concludes with 4 reasons why Arjuna doesn't want to fight. He says, I'm feeling compassion for my friends and relatives. He said, I don't think that I will enjoy this victory even if I kill them. The third reason Arjuna gives is that we will get sinful reactions, Krishna. If we kill, we'll get sinful reactions, karma. See, karma. So why should we kill them? And the fourth reason he gives is, we'll destroy our family traditions. Because men in the family, if the men in the family get killed, then impious people would come and then they would abuse the women and children. Who would take care of women and children if the men get killed? So then what's going to happen? Corruption and moral corruption would happen in the society. As a result, the family traditions would be destroyed, because nobody would be there to uphold these traditions. So based on these four reasons, Arjuna said, I don't want to fight. And I am asking you, Krishna. I don't know what to do. I don't know what my duty is, right? So we saw that, and we saw then the very first argument. So Krishna builds up this argument, and the argument is that, Arjuna, you are not the body. That's the very first thing. So you are the soul, they are the soul, and nobody can kill the soul. Therefore, he who dwells in the body can never be slain. Therefore, don't grieve for any living entity. Why? Because they are living entities. They are souls. The soul is never killed. It's unconquerable, undivisible, unbreakable, so don't worry about it. So that's the end of the first argument of Krishna to Arjuna, right? And that's what Prabhupada is saying, that he's concluding the chapter on the nature of the soul, right? Who is the soul? What is the soul does? The soul is immortal. It's the nature of the soul is consciousness, and the body is temporary. Therefore, don't abandon your duty. We have tried to get away from this war. We have tried every single thing that was possible in our means, because we didn't want war. But war was inevitable. And when the war comes, and you being a Kshatriya, it is your duty. As a warrior, you have to fight. Just like other people have their duty. They have to perform. A surgeon, when he's in the operation theater, he cannot say that, I cannot perform this surgery. It's too risky. Something is going to happen, or, it's my relative. No, it's your duty as a doctor to perform your duty. So similarly, Arjuna, you are in such a situation. Don't run away from your duty. Understand that this is your duty, and understand that nothing will happen to the soul. It's the body. The change of body is inevitable, and it's going to happen. So that concludes the first argument of Krishna to Arjuna. From here on, verse number 31 in the second chapter, then Krishna goes into the second part of it. What's the second part? Karma. Then he explains about performing our duties. What is karma, and how do we know what is our duty actually, and how do we act on that? So I'll take a brief pause here to see if there are any questions or comments or thoughts before moving on to verse number 31. Okay.
Nothing from us.
Okay, no problem. Yep. Okay, so we'll continue on the second side of this, the law of karma, actually understanding karma, and how do we go from there. So Krishna's second point, again, just to put things in context, the Bhagavad Gita was spoken on a battlefield within 1.5 hours, right? It's not a philosophical study that went on. Arjuna is sitting on his chariot in between the war, not knowing what to do. Krishna is speaking these instructions, and they're having this conversation for 1.5 hours on the battlefield, and then they start fighting. So just to put that in context, that this is it's a very brilliant conversation, actually. A song, it's a song. Gita means a song, right? So it's the song of God. Bhagavad Gita is the song of Krishna, because it's sung in this way in Sanskrit. So it's just happening there. Arjuna not knowing, what should I do? I don't know what to do in my life. And you tell me, Krishna. So it's basically just a counseling, a therapy session, if you actually really look at it. Arjuna not knowing. Luckily, his therapist, his philosopher philosopher and guide was right there on the chariot. So that's why he was able to have this conversation right there. So let's see, what is the next thing that Krishna is telling Arjuna? Verse number 31. Swadharmapi chavekshya na vikampitum arhasi dharmyadhi yuddha shreyonyat shratriyasya na vidyate. Synonyms. Swadharmam, one's own religious principles. Api, also. Cha, indeed. Aveksha, considering. Na, never. Vikampitum, to hesitate. Arhasi, you deserve. Dharmayat, for religious principles. He, indeed. Yuddhat, than fighting. Shreya, better engagement. Anyat, any other. Kshatriyasya, of the Kshatriya. Na, does not. Vidyate. So now Krishna is talking about duty. So he described that, Arjuna, nothing happens to the soul. Don't worry about the body. The body is meant to change. It's like garments. Just like you change your garment every morning, wear a different garment, and then you change your garment again the next day. Similarly, the living entity changes its bodies and at the time of death it moves on to a different body. It's just the nature of the world. And after explaining that, now the second phase, what is he saying about your about duty? So considering your specific duty as a kshatriya, you should know that there is no better engagement for you than fighting on religious principles, and so there is no need for hesitation. So now, Arjuna, having understood that nothing happens to the soul and the body is perishable, it's gonna die. Even if you don't do anything, it's just gonna die at some point in time. So the point being, now considering your specific situation, there is no better engagement for you than fighting on religious principles. You learned your entire life, you learned from Dronacharya, your guru. You learned all of these sciences. You know how to wield these incredible weapons. You learned the entire art of army, of arrangement of the soldiers. You learned the entire art of calling these amazing weapons just on the basis of sound. Back in the day, there is a way that you can change matter by your sound. We can simply see this all in the world also. They talk about their entire idea being that positive thinking or positive words have an impact. If you feed negative words to you, you act negatively. If you feed positive words, so words have impact. So similarly, back in the day, the sound was purified. They knew how to channel purified sound. Right now we are in the grips of mode of passion and ignorance, therefore we cannot exhibit that proper pure sound. But when the proper sound is exhibited, you can actually make changes in the world, counteract things, and summon weapons. Like it used to be the situation that they would shout a mantra. Actually, they would utter a mantra, and rainfall would start, and things would happen. Not so long ago, we have heard stories of Tansen, the great singer in the court of King Akbar. That when he used to play certain ragas, certain sounds, it would start raining, like Megh Malhar. So it would start raining actually. Then he would sing Bhim Palasi and wind would blow. So they would have different ways of controlling actually. And we see it today also. There is a great scientist named Dr. Emoto in Japan. He did a research on the molecules of water. So he would subject the water molecules to a particular kind of sound vibration. And then he would look at shapes. And there are many studies that is being done actually, even psychological studies, that how positive reinforcement, positive sounds and uplifting things can make or break people actually, can really make a big difference and have people fight. And then if you feed them negativity, negative things, then they go down. So sound is very powerful. Sound is extremely potent. So the point being that Arjuna, these things. So similarly, because of the sound, Arjuna was able to summon all of these weapons. He learned all of these sciences. He studied Dhanur Vidya, the Shastra Vidya, how to wield different weapons. So Arjuna, you have prepared your life for this time, that eventually if something like this happens as a warrior, then you have to stand up. What to speak of standing for righteousness, not just any war. This is Dharma Yuddha, right? Why? Because you have people who are breaking religious principles, who are breaking the principles of society. They are aggressors, and as a great warrior, it's your responsibility to stand up for what is right, and you are trying to run away, right? Would a doctor, we look at the example of the doctor, that would a doctor run away where it's really time to save somebody and I cannot do my duty? No, it's your duty, Arjuna. So Krishna is saying the argument that do your duty. Understand your duty. What is it? Swadharman, one's own religious principle. So you as a Kshatriya, you have a certain duty to perform, certain engagement. So there should not be any hesitation, Arjuna. Right? There are 4 orders. Prabhupada here explains that there are 4 orders, right? Back in the day, or even today, actually, we see they are not as apparent. But Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. Brahmanas are so it's considered like the human body. So the brain, right? The brain, we have a brain in the body, a mind. So that's Brahmanas, people who do thinking, people who enjoy thinking. Then Kshatriya is considered to be like arms, because they wield weapons and they are leaders and they fight and they lead and they protect. Then we have Vaishyas. Vaishyas are basically people who produce grains and who engaged in business activities, etc. So they are considered to be the stomach, because they produce grains, they take care of cow, they take care of animals, and then they produce grains and food, and they engage in business commercial activities. And then you have Shudra, which is considered to be like the legs. So Brahma legs, because they support all of these 3. So Shudras are basically people who are supporting all of these 3. So Brahmana is the head, Vaishya is the stomach, Kshatriya is the arms, and Shudra is the legs. And this is based on guna and karma. In fourth chapter, as we go, Krishna will explain that this is not by birth. What has happened today is that people have actually completely misunderstood this idea and have decided that a son of Brahmana will be Brahmana, a son of Kshatriya will be Kshatriya. But that's not how it was meant to be. It is based on guna and karma, based on your characteristics and your actions. So a son of a Brahmana may not be a Brahmana if his actions are not Brahminical, if his actions are more like a Kshatriya. And if his qualities are that of a Kshatriya, then he'll be a Kshatriya. It's as simple as that. It's based on your qualities and your actions, not on your birth. So the point being that as a Kshatriya, you have your duty to perform. And even today in the society, we see that some people like to think. Some people are engaged in PhDs, they do their research, or in various places there are thinkers in the world that really like reading and thinking and teaching and academics and just brainstorming. So we can see that they kind of fall into that Brahmana category. Then there are some people who are Kshatriya, who are warriors and who want to protect and who lead. So leaders basically in today's society, we see many of the leaders actually have this Kshatriya spirit, many political leaders in the world. Then we have Vaishyas, people who are engaged in commercial activities. So we have farmers and people who think about money. Their natural tendency is to engage in business activities. We see it all around. And Shudras are basically like employees in the world that we see today, who are serving the other people. So if somebody is thinking, somebody is leading, then Shudras is basically an employee in today's society. Shudra is not a negative term. It is given a negative term because of the caste-based discrimination that happened. But Shudra means essentially who's serving these other people, because a Shudra is because he's unable to exhibit any of these three, so he just happens to serve others. So that's the idea. So that's how it and you have to understand what is your psychophysical nature. That's why back in the day, or even today, sometimes a little kid, when a child is born, they look at the astrological profile of the child, trying to understand, what is the psychophysical nature. If somebody has some qualities of Kshatriya based on their elements, and as they're growing up, then you should engage them in that kind of a career. So that way, they're able to perform their duty as part of their career and get away from many of the reactions would come in. So anyway, point being, Arjuna, you are a Kshatriya. You have exhibited the characteristics of a Kshatriya. You know you are a Kshatriya. You have learned these things. So now it's your duty to protect. It's your duty to protect your constituents. It's your duty to fight for what is right, to uphold the religious principles. Otherwise, look at these guys, Duryodhana, Dushasana. What did they do? They disrobed your wife. They disrobed Draupadi. They insulted her in front of everyone. They insulted me. They insulted Krishna. They are insulting the people who want to follow you. They are levying these taxes on people. They are not giving your fair share. They banished you by cheating in the gambling activity. What kind of principles are they standing for? And Arjuna, you understand, you have read these things. So it's your duty to stand for what is right. So why are you hesitating from it when this is time? I understand it's your family members. I understand you are feeling compassion. But your duty becomes very important in this point. So Arjuna, you have to do it. So here Prabhupada further explains, this is from, I think, Manu Samhita, I guess, where more verses are given. Like, what is a Kshatriya supposed to do? Right? A Kshatriya is supposed to fight. And Kshatriya, killing on the battlefield and killing animals in sacrificial fires are not considered to be acts of violence. Yes. So one of the arguments that Arjuna was giving is that, we'll get negative reactions. And here Krishna, actually the scriptures say that killing somebody for righteous principles is not tantamount to violence. Why? Because you are doing it as a part of duty. A very simple example is just like you have a soldier, right? So a soldier on the battlefield, when the soldier goes and kills somebody, the government offers him the highest kind of honors that they can bestow on that person. But if that same soldier comes out and in a city and start killing people, then that soldier would be jailed, right? So what's the difference? He's doing the same activity of killing. Then what's the difference on doing it on the battlefield as opposed to doing in the city? The point is intention and context, right? He is authorized to do it on the battlefield because he is fighting for a good principle. Maybe the principle won't be good, but the authority, the government has told him. But an unauthorized way of doing it is tantamount to killing, actually, and violence. So similarly, Arjuna, you see that you are not doing it for your own sense gratification. It is to establish a higher principle, and it is justified in war, right? Krishna was never... some people say that Bhagavad Gita only talks about non-violence, right? It's not actually. Bhagavad Gita talks about the idea of performing your duty. Violence, if needed, can be good. For example, here in this case, Krishna engaged in killing, Arjuna engaged in killing, right? When it's needed, when it's time, you have to do your duty. You don't run away, right? Had it been Krishna telling Brahmanas to fight and kill? No, he's telling Kshatriya as a Kshatriya, that's your point, that's your argument, that's your entire idea. So therefore, you should do your duty, right? So this point, Swadharma, is very important actually, this verse, understanding your own duties, right? Dharma. So one has to perform duty according to the particular body that we have been given. Yes, Namit, question? I see your hand is raised.
No, no question. I just wanted to add on to this,
Yeah.
if it's okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
please.
this like it says, ahimsa paramo dharma.
Yeah.
Uh, this is not the full shlok. This is a half shlok, which has been taken out of a context.
Hmm.
Whereas in it's said, agar aapko, it's okay if I speak in Hindi.
Yeah, should be okay. Yeah.
So it says, अगर आपको धर्म की रक्षा के लिए हिंसा करनी पड़ती है, तो that is not a sin.
Right. Right.
So,
Exactly.
and that dharma is usually these days is taken in a context of the rudimentary religion.
Right. Right.
It's
Right.
not.
Right.
It's not that.
Right.
Dharma.
Exactly.
Everyone has a different dharma or a principle or a duty. It's
Right.
based on the duty.
Right. Right. Very true. Yes. Yes.
So,
Dharma actually is actually the nature. So
yeah,
nature is the term for dharma actually. So there is two dharmas. There is the duty when we are in this particular body, and there is
yeah,
duty or dharma, nature of the soul also. For example, the scriptures say that dharma of sugar is sweetness. That's the nature of sugar. You cannot take it away. The nature of salt is saltiness. You cannot take it away. So that's what nature is. So similarly, our soul has a nature. What is that nature? We look into what's the nature of the soul, right? What is the dharma of the soul? And then there is the duty, specific duty here. So here Prabhupada is explaining the two kinds of swadharma. What is it? As long as you are in the body, you have to act according to the guidelines and the principles of the body. And when you are liberated from the body, when you understand that you are not this body, you are spiritual, then you have a spiritual swadharma, right? So in the bodily conception, as Brahmanas and Kshatriyas, such duties are unavoidable. You have to perform your duty. You can't run away. And as a spiritual point of view, when you come once you come to the spiritual point, then you will have a spiritual dharma and your spiritual realization and your primary identity in the spiritual world. Actually, how that goes. The point being, that's why dharma is very important, right? So ahimsa parmo dharma actually is also Buddhist. It's not from the Vedic scriptures. It's by Buddha actually, who later denounced. And there was a reason why Gautam Buddha did also. The reason Gautam Buddha did was, the reason he talked about ahimsa is, what happened at that point was people were engaged using these guidelines. So people were abusing these principles. They were killing animals for their own sake. They were saying that, oh, it's given in the Vedas, we can kill any amount of animals and we can do whatever we want to do. They were killing people. So Buddha said that, what, cut it out. It's to be done in a particular context, at a particular place, at a particular time. Out of context, if you take things, then what, let's reject it. So that's why Buddha came and talked about ahimsa. But actually, Bhagavad Gita talks about duty. So this is the duty, Arjuna. Understand your duty and don't hesitate in performing your duty. And that's why the entire system of Varnashrama that Krishna will talk about in 4th chapter. So understand your duty and do your duty, right? So that's the very first verse that Krishna talks about, is Swadharma. Now let's look at verse number 2. We'll look at 2 more verses and then we'll summarize. So verse number 32. Yadrachaya chupapannam swargadwaram apavartam sukhina kshatriya partha labante yuddham idrasham. Yadrachaya, by its own accord. Cha, also. Upapannam, arrived at Swarga, of the heavenly planets. Dwaram, door. Apavritam, wide open. Sukhinaha, very happy. Kshatriya, the members of the royal order. Partha, O son of Partha. Labhante, do achieve. Yuddham, war. Idrasham, like this. Translation. O Partha, happy are the Kshatriyas to whom such fighting opportunities come unsought, opening for them the doors of the heavenly planets. So Krishna is now telling Arjuna that, Arjuna, by doing your duty, this is a great fortune, that this such an amazing opportunity has arrived for you. You have trained for this all your life. You are a Kshatriya. And right now you are fighting the greatest war that could possibly happen. in this present Mahabharata, in this situation of the world actually, because Mahabharata, many people think that, it's like India, it's the fight was in India. But back in the day, we are talking about 5,500 years from today, right? Back then, a lot of the king either pledged their allegiance to Duryodhana or gave their allegiance to Pandavas. It was divided into two. There were many other kingdoms. For example, the Mahabharata talks about the kingdoms of the Chinas, which is basically modern day China, the kingdoms of the Mlechas and Yavanas, which is basically modern day Europe. So there were many kings and many kingdoms and many royalty and people from all of these places also. But they gave their allegiance to one or the other side, and that's why they were arranged actually. So it's very similar to how Great Britain and Spain were rising a few hundred years ago. We saw that many people were supporting the British, many people, and they're kind of British colonies in one way, right? And many people were supporting the Spanish, and they were the Spanish colonies, and they had a fight between each other. So the idea remains very similar, that many of these great kingdoms around the world, they gave their allegiance to one side or the other. And what happened later was, that's why all of these armies were arranged there actually. So that's why they were called as king of the Bharatvarsha, and this entire earth was known as Bharatvarsha. Later on, when these scriptures were not honored, when many of these people broke away, there was a lot of corruption within their lineage also. After Arjuna left, after Abhimanyu, after Parikshit came, and after Parikshit, their descendants came in. And as Kali Yuga progressed, what started happening was that these other kingdoms, they stopped giving their allegiance to the Vedic kingdom. So that's why they started their own traditions, and we had the Greeks and Roman Empire and everything that came up in the world today. But previously they gave their allegiance. That's why today also you will find many similarities between, first of all, in the language, right? Sanskrit can be considered actually, many Greek and Latin words actually go back to Sanskrit. Some common examples being like mother. Mother in English, right, comes from mater in Latin, which comes from matar in Sanskrit. Similarly, father, pitar, pitar, right, pitra from Sanskrit. So there are many such. I actually have a list of many of these words which come from these places as to how the languages came about. But the point being that this was not just a regular war. Armies of the world, kingdoms of the world were arrayed on either sides of the battlefield to fight. So this is the greatest possible opportunity that could come for you, Arjuna. And you are running away from this. This also, not that Arjuna cared about going for heavenly planets, but Kshatriyas actually who perform their duty. It opens the doors for these. The Vedas talk about the four principles of life: Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. Dharma means performing your duty. If you perform your duty well, you get Artha. Artha is basically Punya. You get positive credit so that you can use that positive credit for a better life. For Kama. And after you are done, then you should look for Moksha. That's the four Purusharthas of the Vedas. Right? We don't necessarily, the spiritual practitioners don't adhere to that. We'll talk about it, why we are talking about going away from Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha also in later point. The point being that, Arjuna, if you do your duty well, then you will be able to get away from all of these things. You will be able to fight for the righteous principles that you stand for. So therefore, my dear Arjuna, don't worry. Just fight, just perform, and just do your duty. Right? In the purport here, it is explained that Kshatriya's duty. What is the Kshatriya of duty? In the Parashar Smriti, the codes written by sage Parashar, the father of Vyasdev, he wrote these codes. What did he say? He said that the Kshatriya's duty is to protect citizens from all kinds of difficulties, and for that reason he has to apply violence in suitable cases for law and order, right? So it's required actually, where you have to apply violence as needed. You have to conquer the soldiers of inimical kings, and thus with religious principles you should rule over. So inimical kings who do not know the value of human life, you have to conquer, and you have to teach them the right way of living life, because life is not just meant for enjoyment. Life is meant for knowing higher principles in life. So a Kshatriya is supposed to do that. So therefore Krishna is saying that, Arjuna, don't refrain from fighting. Please get up, please fight, and please do your duty. And even if you do that, even if you die, it elevates the door for going up. So therefore, Arjuna, don't worry, don't be afraid. As a Kshatriya, perform your duty. Go for it. Don't worry about it. We'll look at one last verse for today, and then I'll conclude. We'll look at verse number 33. अथा चेत्त्वम् इमं धर्म्यं सङ्ग्रामं न करिष्यसि तथा स्वधर्मं कीर्तिं च हित्वा पापम् अवपश्यसि. Synonyms: Atha, therefore, cheta, if, tvam, you, imam, this, dharmyam, your religious duty, sangramam, fighting, na, do not, karishyasi, do not perform, tatah, then, swadharmam, then your duty, your religious duty, kirtim, reputation, cha, also, hitva, losing, papam, sinful reaction, avapashyasi, will gain. So Krishna is saying, if however, if you do not perform your duty of fighting, then you will incur sins for neglecting your duties and thus lose your reputation as a fighter. So Arjuna, it's not how you think that by killing them you'll accrue sins. Actually, by not killing them you'll accrue sins. Why? Because you're running away from your duty. As a Kshatriya, it's your duty. So you will accrue sins and you will lose your reputation as a great fighter. You are known around the world and you will lose that reputation. So fight. Everybody knew Arjuna was the greatest student of Dronacharya, who taught Arjuna very well, gave him benedictions, right? So Arjuna, don't worry. You would lose all your fame and name and all good qualities that you have accrued. Why? Because you are running away from your duty. So don't run away from your duty. Okay, we'll conclude today's discussion. So we looked at 3 verses today. We looked at verses 30th. Actually, we looked at 31st, 32nd. Sorry, no. We looked at 5 verses today. We looked at from verse 29 to verse 33. So we started with Krishna's conclusion to Arjuna. The first argument of Krishna that why you should fight is that you are a soul, you are not the body. And this soul is phenomenal. It's amazing. If you think about the soul, how it pervades the consciousness, how consciousness comes about, how consciousness interacts in the world, it is actually mind-blowing if you think about it. And we know today scientists are floundered by this idea of understanding consciousness. They don't know where to start, where to end. Why? Because it's not material. They will come to a point where they realize, and many people are coming to this conclusion that this is anti-material, or this is beyond matter, this is beyond the scope of our observation, beyond the scope of our measurement. So we need better ways of measuring, better ways of understanding. So this soul is an amazing thing. Krishna is saying that. So you are a soul, they are a soul, they are never killed, you are never killed, the body changes, so don't worry. Then second argument, his final conclusion was that it cannot be killed. The body is killed, the soul. So don't grieve, don't worry that what's going to happen to that person, what's going to happen to them. It happens to the body, not to the soul, Arjuna, right? So that's the very first argument that we should also apply in our lives when we sometimes become unduly worried about things in the world and we lose this sight. So we have to see it from that perspective of the soul and the consciousness. That's the point that Krishna is making. And second, the importance of performing our duty, knowing our duty and performing our duty. So then Krishna says that as a Kshatriya, this is your duty. There's no better engagement for you. So you can't run away. You have to fight on these grounds. There's no need for hesitation. It's the need of the hour. You're trained for it. You studied for it. These are great fighting opportunities. You have to lead these kings who are inimical, who don't know what's the value of human life, to the right path so that they can help the people. The purpose of a great king or of a leader was to help their constituents understand self-realization and not just waste their life in enjoyment, but to show them that life is actually meant for higher principles, for understanding why we are here and what is the purpose of life, and then extending cooperation and leading for higher principles. Not the present day chaos that we are seeing where one fish is trying to eat the other fish and people are just focusing on just enjoyment and not knowing the purpose of life and dying without knowing the purpose of life. That's what happens when we don't have good Kshatriya kings who don't know what's the value of life. So we need such kings. So Arjuna, that's why you have to fight. This opportunity has come unsought for you and it opens the door for heavenly planets. Not that you care, but if you do, even if you die, you will go to heavenly planets because of just by doing your duty. So, but if you do not perform your duty, then you will incur sins and you will neglect your duty and you lose your reputation as a fighter. So don't lose your reputation, Arjuna, that you have built all this life, and don't neglect your duty. Do your duty. We'll continue with other verses next week. So from verse 34 to 37, Krishna talks about more idea of performing your prescribed duty. Then from verse 38 to 53, so from 38 onwards till verse number 53 is Karma Yoga. What is Karma Yoga? How do we understand karma? What do the Vedas talk about karma yoga? right? And the famous verses that we have often seen from B.R. Chopra's Mahabharata back in the day, Yada Yada Hi Dharmasya, those two verses, Paritranaya Sadhunam, those verses will come here. So we'll look at from till verse number 53, we'll see the importance of detached work. What is karma yoga and how to do karma without being attached. And finally, from 54 to 72 is Arjuna asks Krishna, what is the nature of a person who is liberated, who is Jivan Mukta, who has surpassed these tendencies? What is their symptoms and how do they act and what do they look like? What do they say? So from 54 to 72 of this chapter, we go into that point. So we'll continue with these three major themes in this chapter. Second chapter is again called as Contents of the Gita Summarized. It's the largest chapter in the Bhagavad Gita because there's a lot. Well, the last chapter is there too, but last chapter is kind of conclusion. So this chapter summarizes the major themes of Bhagavad Gita: the nature of the soul, importance of duty, law of karma, detached duty, and people who are liberated. What do they look like? What happens there? So it gets very interesting, and this is just the second chapter. We'll continue reading it more. If there are any final thoughts or questions or comments, I'll take it. Otherwise, we can just conclude the conversation for today. Any final thoughts, Namit, Ashish, Amrita?
No, Ronak, thank you. Thanks for today's session.
Oh, thank you for joining. Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, nothing from my side. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for joining. I'll post the recording in the group. Neelam will post the summary for what we discussed so far. All the previous discussions also, if you ever want to look at, they are on our YouTube. I'll post that link so you can go from that channel and see if anything specific. But otherwise, yeah, and all the summaries are also posted, one-page summaries that Neelam posts that are also in our group again. Thank you so much for joining. We'll continue our conversations next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a great evening.
Thank you, Ronak.
Bye-bye.
Bye.